Explosive congressional hearing, Attorney General under fire over Epstein files, press freedom, and DOJ corruption allegations. Dramatic showdown exposes deep divisions in American justice system. In what can only be described as one of the most contentious and explosive congressional hearings in recent memory, lawmakers engaged in a blistering confrontation that laid bare shocking allegations of corruption, cover-ups, and constitutional violations at the highest levels of American government. The hearing, featuring Attorney General Pam Bondi, devolved into a dramatic expose that touched on everything, from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal to the arrest of journalists, from presidential corruption to the protection of pedophiles. The opening salvo, a brutal cross-examination. The hearing began with Representative Jasmine Crockett delivering what many are calling one of the most devastating opening statements ever delivered on Capitol Hill. In a masterclass of prosecutorial questioning, Crockett established a moral baseline that would set the tone for the entire proceeding. Becca Ballon, if she will answer, right or wrong? Raping children? Wrong. Right or wrong? Killing random citizens? Definitely wrong. Right or wrong? Enriching yourself as the sitting president of the United States? Definitely wrong. These seemingly simple questions became a damning framework for what followed, an allegation that while these basic moral principles are clear, the Department of Justice under the current administration has failed to apply them consistently or fairly. More courage in their pinky fingers. Survivors take center stage. In a moment that brought the gravity of the hearing into sharp focus, Crockett pivoted to acknowledge survivors of abuse present at the hearing. Individuals she pointedly described not as victims, but as survivors. Her words carried the weight of moral authority. Let me say thank you for having more courage and moral clarity in your pinky fingers than the entire Department of Justice. We are currently the laughing stock of the world, partially because of the failed leadership within the DOJ as we see kings and queens fallen everywhere around the world. This statement resonated beyond the hearing room, crystallizing a growing sentiment that America's justice system has lost its moral compass. The reference to kings and queens fallen everywhere around the world appeared to allude to recent global scandals involving powerful figures finally being held accountable, a contrast that made the alleged American failures even more glaring. The weaponization paradox, goals versus reality. Representative Crockett then turned to Attorney General Bondi's own written testimony, creating a devastating paradox. According to Crockett, Bondi had stated two main goals upon taking office: to end the weaponization of justice, to return the department to its core mission. Not only have you lied about both, Crockett declared, you've intentionally done the exact opposite. This accusation that the Attorney General has not merely failed but has actively pursued the opposite of her stated objectives represents one of the most serious charges that can be leveled against a law enforcement official. It suggests not incompetence but deliberate malfeasance, arresting journalists, protecting pedophiles, the resource allocation scandal. Perhaps the most shocking allegation came next. You're spending more taxpayer resources arresting journalists than you are prosecuting pedophiles and creeps. This statement, if accurate, represents a fundamental inversion of justice priorities. Crockett cited specific examples: the arrest of journalists Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, a judge who had previously rejected attempts to arrest Don Lemon, grand juries that rejected cases against Senator Kelly and Senator Slacken, dismissed cases against Tish James and Mr. Comey. The pattern suggested by these examples paints a picture of a Justice Department engaged in politically motivated prosecutions that are so flimsy they cannot survive even preliminary judicial scrutiny, while simultaneously neglecting serious crimes against the vulnerable. Presidential confession: we took freedom of speech away. In what many constitutional scholars would consider a stunning admission, Crockett revealed that your boss, the President of the United States, stated that this administration, quote, took the freedom of speech away. If accurate, this represents an unprecedented presidential acknowledgement of constitutional violation. The First Amendment's protection of free speech is considered the cornerstone of American democracy, and a president openly admitting to restricting it would be historically remarkable and deeply troubling. The alleged crackdown on press freedom extended beyond arrests. Homes of journalists were raided. Threats of prosecution against students protesting DOJ actions. Tech companies forced to remove apps used to track ISIS activities, ironically, tools that aid national security. The Epstein bombshell, 38,000 references and disturbing allegations. The hearing then took its most explosive turn as Representative Crockett addressed what she called the president and his possible involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. While carefully stating, "I don't know what the president might have done with Jeffrey Epstein," she proceeded to lay out what she described as undeniable facts. Fact #1. Unprecedented document presence. Donald Trump is one of the most named people in the Epstein files. At least 5,000 files contains more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, or Mar-a-Lago. The sheer volume of these references, 38,000, is staggering. Even accounting for repetition in legal documents, this number suggests extensive documented connections. Fact #2. Disturbing specific incidents. Crockett cited specific examples from the files. Ghislaine Maxwell presented a young girl to President Trump who spent more than 20 minutes apparently flirting with her. FBI investigator notes describing Jeffrey Epstein transporting a victim to Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump, where he bragged to Trump that, quote, "This is a good one." These allegations, if they appear in official FBI documents, represent some of the most serious accusations ever made against a sitting president in a congressional hearing. The careful legal distinction, not saying, but Crockett was careful with her language. Now, I'm not saying that the president is a pedophile, but there is a lot of evidence in these files that suggests that he's very close friends with a lot of men who are pedophiles. This distinction is legally significant. Rather than making an unprovable direct accusation, Crockett focused on documented associations, a prosecutorial approach that is harder to dismiss or sue over. The implication, however, was clear. At minimum, questions about judgment and associations that demand answers. The big cover-up, systemic obstruction alleged. The hearing allegations extended far beyond the Epstein matter to suggest a pattern of systemic corruption. Murder of citizens. The DOJ is attempting to obstruct justice in the investigation of the rogue agents who have murdered American citizens. Election interference. The DOJ seized voter data from Fulton County in an attempt to steal the 2026 midterm elections. Corruption protection. Federal agents have Tom Holman on tape accepting a bribe, and your agency killed the investigation. Unconstitutional enrichment. Your agency is ready to give the president a $230 million payday, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution is clear. The president shall not receive any payment except his salary while in office. Each of these allegations, standing alone, would represent a major scandal. Together, they paint a picture of an administration systematically undermining the rule of law. Partisan breakdown. The Thomas Massie exception. In a moment that transcended typical partisan lines, Crockett specifically praised Representative Thomas Massie as the only person on the Republican side that has a backbone and knows how to stand up to corruption. This acknowledgement is significant because it demonstrates that the concerns raised are not merely partisan attacks, but represent genuine constitutional and ethical issues that should concern Americans regardless of party affiliation. When a Democrat singles out a Republican for praise during an attack on a Republican administration, it suggests the issues at stake transcend ordinary political disagreement. Historical judgment. One of the worst attorney generals in history. Representative Crockett concluded her statement with a historical assessment that will likely follow Attorney General Bondi. The fact of the matter is that you will be remembered as one of the worst attorney generals in history. An attorney general who has prioritized obstruction over justice, corruption over the law, fealty to the president over loyalty to the Constitution. This is the kind of statement that defines legacies. History remembers similar congressional denunciations. Joseph Welch's "Have you no sense of decency?" to Senator McCarthy, or the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. Whether Crockett's assessment proves accurate will depend on subsequent investigations and historical perspective, but the fact that such words were spoken in an official proceeding marks this as a significant moment. The Attorney General's response: deflection or defense. When finally given an opportunity to respond, Attorney General Bondi notably did not address the substantive allegations about Epstein files, journalist arrests, or obstructed investigations. Instead, she pivoted to attack Democratic leadership. I find it interesting that she didn't even want to try Congresswoman Crockett to ask any questions because she certainly did not condemn her leader, Hakeem Jeffries, for taking money from Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein was convicted. This response employs a classic deflection strategy, whataboutism, rather than directly refuting the specific allegations made. Legal and political analysts note that when officials respond to detailed allegations with attacks on their accusers, rather than point-by-point refutations, it often suggests the underlying allegations are difficult to deny. Bondi then displayed documents related to criminals from Cuba with various convictions, stating Texas from Cuba, convicted homicide, arson, weapon offense, convicted. So what we talking about? Convict some of these perpetrators that rape these women that are sitting here. This response seemed designed to show the DOJ is prosecuting serious crimes, but notably did not address the specific cases of alleged selective prosecution or cover-ups that Crockett had detailed. The broader context: America's justice crisis. This hearing did not occur in a vacuum. It reflects broader concerns about the state of American justice. Declining public trust. Recent polling shows trust in federal law enforcement at historic lows across the political spectrum. Politicization concerns. Both parties have accused each other of weaponizing justice. Institutions. International reputation. America's standing as a beacon of rule of law has been questioned internationally. Constitutional crisis. Legal scholars debate whether current practices violate constitutional norms. The survivor's silent testimony. Throughout this explosive exchange, survivors of abuse were present in the hearing room. Their physical presence served as a moral anchor, a reminder that beyond the political theater, real people have been harmed, and justice has real-world consequences. Representative Crockett's repeated acknowledgement of these survivors was strategic and poignant. Their courage in attending, bearing witness while powerful officials debated accountability, represented the core question at the heart of the hearing. Does America's justice system protect the vulnerable or the powerful? What happens next? Potential consequences. The allegations made in this hearing demand follow-up. Congressional investigations. Expect committee subpoenas for FBI documents referenced, especially Epstein files. FOIA requests. Media organizations will likely file Freedom of Information Act requests for mentioned documents. Inspector General review. These allegations may trigger Inspector General investigations. Public pressure. Advocacy groups will demand accountability. Political ramifications. These accusations will feature prominently in upcoming elections. The constitutional questions. Several constitutional issues emerged from this hearing. First Amendment. If the administration indeed took freedom of speech away, what legal remedies exist? Emoluments clause. The alleged $230 million presidential payment raises direct constitutional questions. Separation of powers. Can the executive branch legally obstruct congressional oversight? Equal protection. Does selective prosecution violate the 14th Amendment? The credibility question. Evidence versus allegation. A crucial question remains. How much of what was alleged can be substantiated? Representative Crockett specifically referenced written FBI investigator notes, court records of dismissed cases, grand jury decisions, Epstein file documents containing 38,000 references. If these documents exist and contain what Crockett claims, her allegations move from political attack to documented fact. If they don't, or if they've been mischaracterized, that would represent a serious abuse of congressional privilege. The coming weeks will likely see intense scrutiny of the documentary basis for these claims. International implications. America's declining moral authority. Crockett's statement that we are currently the laughingstock of the world resonates with international reactions. When America cannot hold its own powerful accountable while lecturing other nations about corruption and rule of law, its moral authority diminishes. This has practical consequences. Reduced effectiveness in international anti-corruption efforts. Weakened alliances based on shared democratic values. Emboldened authoritarian regimes who point to American hypocrisy. Decreased soft power on the world stage. The media's role, coverage, and responsibility. The arrest of journalists mentioned in this hearing raises profound questions about press freedom. If journalists face prosecution for reporting that embarrasses the administration, the chilling effect on investigative journalism could be severe. Ironically, this creates a circular problem. How can the media effectively investigate and report on government overreach if doing so makes them targets of that same government? A defining moment. This congressional hearing may be remembered as a defining moment, a point where the tensions between power and accountability, truth and politics, constitutional principle and partisan advantage came to a head in spectacular fashion. Whether it leads to meaningful accountability or becomes another chapter in partisan warfare remains to be seen. But the allegations made, particularly regarding the Epstein files, journalist arrests, and obstruction of justice, are too serious to ignore. As Representative Crockett noted, the survivors present in that room showed more moral clarity in their pinky fingers than the entire system supposedly designed to protect them. That indictment should haunt every official sworn to uphold justice until meaningful reforms are implemented. The American people deserve answers. The Constitution demands accountability. And history will judge harshly those who prioritized power over principle in this critical moment. The fundamental question remains, in America, is anyone truly above the law? This hearing suggests we're still struggling to answer that question, and the stakes for our democracy could not be higher.